Before we get started, I want to thank CatholicsForTrump.com for putting this timeline together, from which I have borrowed heavily. I have a personal email account through a well-known left-leaning company. During the second week of August, I logged in to check my email and was immediately hit with an article stating that voters' number one objection to Donald Trump had to do with his making fun of a reporter with a disability. I was both shocked and amazed that this was still an issue. Why? Because in reality, it never happened. The whole saga began on November 21st, 2015, when Donald Trump stated that he remembered seeing Arabs living in this country celebrating the 9/11 attacks, cheering as the Twin Towers came crashing down. He said, and I quote, "I watched when the World Trade Center came tumbling down, and I watched in New Jersey City, New Jersey, when thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down. Thousands of people were cheering." A few days later, Trump was interviewed by former Clinton communications director and DNC operative George Stephanopoulos, who now works as the chief political correspondent for ABC News. Trump left out the thousands and thousands remark, but doubled down on his statement, saying, "There were people that were cheering on the other side of New Jersey, where you have large Arab populations. They were cheering as the World Trade Center came down. I know it might not be politically correct for you to talk about it, but there were people cheering as that building came down, and that tells you something." Now the media, especially the Washington Post, went after Trump with a vengeance, claiming that this was not true. Trump, they inferred, was either making it up or he was delusional. The same paper even went so far as to write a detailed article claiming to fact-check Mr. Trump. After an exhaustive review, the Post lectured that there was absolutely no evidence of Trump's claim and deemed it false. But Mr. Trump was neither wrong nor delusional. Eventually, a video from a local CBS affiliate surfaced, which had been broadcast just 5 days after the 9/11 attacks, in which the news anchor said this:
"After the attacks in New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania. However, what no one outside the terrorist task force knows is that just a couple of blocks away from that Jersey City apartment the FBI raided yesterday and where they had evidence removed is another apartment building. One that investigators told me, quote, is swarming with suspects. Suspects who I'm told were cheering on the roof when they saw the plane slam into the Trade Center."
Surely that was a slap in the face to the media, which had ridiculed Donald Trump. But as if to make matters worse, especially for the Washington Post, who claimed to have fact-checked Donald Trump's statement, an article by one of their own reporters, Serge Kovaleski, came to light. Kovaleski, writing for the Post on September 18, 2001, stated, and I quote, "In Jersey City, within hours of two jetliners plowing into the World Trade Center, law enforcement authorities detained and questioned a number of people who were allegedly seen celebrating the attacks and holding tailgate-style parties on rooftops while they watched the devastation on the other side of the river. With egg dripping off their faces, the Post had to do something." CatholicsForTrump.com writes, "Very embarrassing for the media, especially the Washington Post, which had done such a great job scouring news reports after 9/11 that they missed their very own story on the subject. It was in this state of embarrassment that the media was desperate to distract from the matter. The Washington Post ended up finding Kovaleski, now writing for the New York Times, so that he could do damage control. Kovaleski predictably tried to backtrack from his 2001 account, saying he didn't remember the details. So the now embarrassed Washington Post had Kovaleski release a statement in which he said, "I certainly do not remember anyone saying that thousands or even hundreds of people were celebrating. That was not the case, as best as I can remember." In an attempt to deflect the truth that there were people celebrating the destruction of the Twin Towers, the Post attempted to bring into question the numbers engaged in this barbaric activity. But it wasn't working. They needed to find something else, anything to deflect attention away from the sloppy research their fact-checkers did. A few days later, when Trump was at a rally in South Carolina, he commented on Kovaleski's attempt to backtrack his 2001 statement. He did this by moving his hands in a manner which showed someone flustered.
Written by a nice reporter. Now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. Oh, I don't remember. He's going like, I don't remember. Oh, maybe that's what I said. This is 14 years ago. They didn't do a retraction.
The irony is that Trump had used the exact same visual arm movements when describing others who, when put on the spot, were flustered. He did this in reference to Ted Cruz when he was explaining his position on waterboarding.
They said, Senator Cruz, what do you think of waterboarding? I don't want to talk about it. He didn't want to talk about waterboarding.
And though not as extreme, he did the same arm movements with reference to an army general who, according to Trump, did a poor job answering a question about ISIS.
And I watched a general recently on television, and they said to him, what do you think about ISIS? Oh, ISIS is very tough.
It needs to be noted that neither of these men has a disability. Therefore, since they don't have a disability, and Kovaleski does, and Trump did the same arm movements for all three, then it must follow that he was not making fun of a disability, rather, he was giving a visual for something else. But the dishonest left-leaning media doesn't care about truth. As stated previously, they needed a distraction from the fact that their fact-checkers were wrong about Arabs celebrating after the 9/11 attacks. But how? How could they take the spotlight off themselves and redirect it back to Trump? CatholicsForTrump.com explains how, and they hit the nail on its proverbial head. Soon thereafter, the media revealed still photos of Kovaleski with his right hand in a permanently flexed position downward, announcing that he was disabled. The media then shifted from trying to defend their oversight of the 9/11 Post article, and instead, with disapproving shocked outrage, accused Trump of mocking a reporter's disability. Some liberals went even further and freeze-framed a millisecond of the Trump video at the exact moment when his hand went into a flexed posture. Then they dishonestly put this screen capture side by side with a picture of Kovaleski's flexed hand. Thus you saw the following photo spread like wildfire over social media, with commentary condescendingly and horrifyingly excoriating Trump as a monster. Trump, according to the egg-faced media, was mocking the way Kovaleski moves his arms. But what you probably don't know, what the media never showed you, was Mr. Kovaleski's arm doesn't move when he speaks. In fact, it doesn't move the way Trump showed someone flustered at all, as is evident from the video you are now watching. In fact, Kovaleski's condition restricts arm movement. It doesn't cause spasms or uncontrolled arm movements. One could argue that if Trump had wanted to mock the backpedaling reporter for his disability, he should have stood completely still. As the false and concocted story gained steam, Trump was asked if he remembered the reporter. He said he didn't, and therefore had no knowledge that the reporter was a handicap. But Mr. Kovaleski, according to Newsmax, an outfit which partners with the always truthful New York Times on its PolitiFact story, stated, Kovaleski said he and Trump knew each other well because the reporter regularly covered the New York businessman for years. Archived reports support that. But it is interesting that neither Newsmax nor the New York Times, in their so-called PolitiFact story, gives a date of the last time Kovaleski interviewed Trump. Was it 10 years ago or 20 years ago? Were all the interviews in person when Kovaleski covered Trump? If you stick with the previously mentioned two papers, you would never know. But the Post did give the dates when Kovaleski covered Trump, between 1987 and 1993. That was at least 22 years ago. Surely no one in their right mind would require Trump to remember this person 22 years later. Allow me to explain it this way. I had a friend who met a famous person 3 times. My friend loved to brag that he knew this person. When I had a chance to meet the same famous person, I asked them if they had heard from my friend. Guess what? The famous person did not know of whom I was speaking. Why? My friend looked up to this person and therefore remembered everything, every detail from the 3 times they met. But the famous person meets hundreds of people a month and my friend just isn't that memorable. CatholicsForTrump.com continues. Trump's impersonations of a flustered reporter was turned into a left-wing and establishment GOP narrative whereby Trump somehow hates the disabled. This despite the fact that Trump has given millions to charity that help the disabled, including raising nearly $6 million for wounded warriors, $1 million of which was his own money. In addition, Liz Crokin, a journalist that has covered Donald Trump for 10 years, recalls the following. In 1988, a commercial airline refused to fly Andrew Tin, a sick Orthodox Jewish child with a rare illness, across the country to get medical care because he had to travel with an elaborate life support system. His grief-stricken parents contacted Trump for help, and he didn't hesitate to send his own plane to take the child from Los Angeles to New York so he could get his treatment. And this is just one story about Donald Trump helping those who are disabled. Folks, Donald Trump did not make fun of a reporter with a disability. He did something worse. He embarrassed the media, especially the Washington Post, whose crummy fact-checkers failed to uncover the true story of Middle Easterners living in New Jersey celebrating the deaths of 3,000 Americans on 9/11, a story one of their own reporters covered. As someone who has been around disabled folks my whole life, as one whose wife worked with those who are deemed severe and profound, if I believed that Mr. Trump truly mocked a man with a disability, I would be writing a very different article and recording a very different video. But the sad thing is, there are those who still perpetrate this lie, even when confronted with the facts.